If you're on the hunt for a new concealer for acne-prone, textured, oily skin, then you're gonna wanna watch this video before you shop because I tried some of the most viral concealers and you best believe I'm gonna share with you my real unfiltered review, and at the end, I'm gonna let you know which ones are my personal favorite. First up is the Tower28 Concealer. I have the shade in OC and I have filmed a shorts video on this. For all of my friends with sensitive acne-prone skin, Tower28 is finally giving us our concealer moment. But is it worth it? I think the reason why they call it swipe is because it has just this ability to almost like make your lines disappear. I don't know how to explain it. It is a creamy formula that is almost like the feeling of a moisturizer, and it's also very hydrating on the skin. If you've ever tried their lip gloss, it has this ability to kind of not fill in the lines of your lips, but make them disappear. And I feel like that's what this concealer does. And because of the texture of this concealer, I find that it is pretty standout and unique in comparison to the other concealers I'm going to talk about in today's video. It also makes it really good to use as a foundation. The downside about this concealer is that under the eyes, I find that it heavily creases. In terms of shade range, I have the color OC, which I think matches me pretty well, but I couldn't really find my perfect match. I was in between 10 NoHo and then 11 OC, and then if I went deeper, I felt like it was too deep for me. And when I look at the shade range, I do think that there's a little bit of work that needs to be done, just because this formula, even though it's medium coverage, it is packed in pigment, so you do want to choose a shade that matches you almost perfectly, because you're gonna notice a difference if you use the wrong shade. If you have sensitive, acne-prone, and textured skin, this is so flattering. And of course, it is Tower28, so this is made for sensitive skin, and it is non-comedogenic, so you can feel comfortable wearing this on your skin without thinking that you are going to clog your pores or break out in the future. Next up is the Kosas Revealer Concealer, and I was so late on the bandwagon with this one. I mentioned it in the last video. Not worth the hype. It's not worth the hype. It's not worth the hype. YSL Candy Glaze. This is worth the hype. I'm obsessed with this. But I would vote this concealer as the best everyday concealer. It is one of the lightest coverage concealers in this video. I would consider it a light to medium coverage. The texture is creamy, but it's not as thick as the Tower28 concealer. It's much more like a serum formula that blends into your skin and kind of molds into the finish of your natural skin. It does say online that this is supposed to be hydrating and radiant, but I personally have experienced it to be a little bit more of a natural finish, at least on my skin. In terms of shade range, I have the shade 060. The major downside about the shade range of this concealer is that it does lean more yellow and warm tone, so if you are a cool undertone, you might have a hard time finding something that aligns with your skin tone in this line, but there are so many other better concealers out there, so I don't really think you're necessarily missing out. I think the reason why I personally really like this, and also the same reason why many others really like this, is just because it is so natural. Doesn't give the most coverage, but it gives the most skin-like finish. If you have acne-prone skin, this is also a non-comedogenic formula, so you don't have to worry about this concealer clogging your pores either. With all of that being said, I think that this concealer is pretty average, but I'm still gonna rate it a 4 out of 5. Next up is the Haus Labs Concealer. let me tell you, I've had such a journey with this product. At first, I just had a difficult time finding the right shade. I forgot to preface in the beginning of this video that the concealers that I like to choose in terms of shade is not really to brighten my under eyes, but to match my skin tone. I bought about, I think, 2 of these before I landed on this shade right here because I found that they just weren't the right undertone, or they were just way too light for me. The shade I ended up landing on was 31N. In case you have the same problem, I think the initial reason why I didn't love this concealer was because I was trying to choose a shade that matched my skin tone perfectly. I was also using this as a spot concealer because it is supposed to be like medium to full coverage, and it is by far the most thickest, creamiest texture out of all of the concealers I'm mentioning in this video. But the problem is that this product is a little bit more of a luminous, hydrating finish. So when I spot conceal or I'm trying to cover up my dark spots or acne spots, it is only gonna enhance my texture. It's only gonna enhance the acne. And it also, I feel like it doesn't fully set even though it's technically supposed to. And because of that, I think I can feel it on my skin, and that's really rare. But I fell in love with this concealer because I think under the eyes is where it performs the best. And I also realized that this concealer was primarily made for under the eyes. So in terms of how it aligns with its marketing, I think it aligns with its marketing the best. And using it under the eyes provides very minimal creasing, which is really rare for me. I feel like every concealer creases on me. But as a spot conceal, I would say take a pass. This is the Kulfi Main Match Concealer in the shade Mango Drop. This was sent to me in PR, but it is not sponsored at all. I was personally really excited about Kulfi because they are a South Asian owned brand, and when I used this concealer on my skin, I was shooketh. I was shooketh because I wasn't even sure if this shade was going to match me. You know, sometimes you look online, you don't know if something is going to work for you, but when I used this, it matched me almost perfectly, and I was just so excited to finally have a concealer that I feel like aligns with my skin tone. It is a very serum-like thin texture. It is hydrating and has a radiant finish, probably one of the more glowier finishes in comparison to the previous concealers that I just mentioned. And I would consider the coverage to be medium. It's definitely more coverage than the Kosas concealer though, which I think makes this a little bit better in that way. I really like the way that this looked under my eyes. Just like the Haus Labs, I found it to be really hydrating under the eyes, but not too thick. It gave me that medium coverage and didn't have a lot of creasing at all. As for spot concealing, again, I personally don't really like radiant concealers for spot concealing because it tends to like enhance my texture and enhance the spots that I kind of want to disappear. So I wouldn't use it for that. I would mainly use it if you want a really good under eye concealer, or if you do like that hydrating finish and you don't have a lot of like acne to cover up or anything, then I would recommend this. All in all, I would say that this is a pretty average concealer for me, and I would rate it a 3 out of 5. I don't know if I'm gonna reach for this over all of my other concealers, just because I don't find there to be like anything special about this, except that it matches my skin tone perfectly. Next up is the Natasha Denona Concealer, and I feel like everyone loves this, and I'm still trying to figure out how I can love this because I love the uniqueness of this formula. It is the thinnest, most liquidy concealer texture that I've ever tried, but it's packed in pigment and truly like full coverage. My problem with this concealer is that it was hard to find a shade, which is so strange because it has such a big shade range. I think I do need to go with another shade. There are color corrector shades and there are normal shades, so you have so much to choose from, which is amazing, but at the same time, overwhelming. And when I chose YN9, I think it leans a little too light, a little bit too neutral for me. Under the eyes, it works perfectly fine, but for spot concealing, it doesn't really match with the undertones of my foundations. A lot of my foundations lean very very like warm toned, and this is very much like neutral. So I think I need another shade. It does crease significantly, and under my eyes it like enhances or like brings out dryness I never thought I had before, and I rarely ever have that problem. Like I have oily skin. Same thing with other parts of my skin. I feel that it just like brings it out. And so I don't want to call this like a bad product yet, just because I think I just need a little bit more time, maybe try another color, maybe use less product, and also try it with my fingers. But as of right now, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. I would say that this is a solid 2 out of 5 as of right now, and I don't want to say below average because it's a special formula, but like somewhat below average. But let me know, like, do you like this? Comment down below how you use it, how you would recommend to use it, because for me, it just looks disgusting on my skin. Speaking of concealers that look a little bit crusty, this is the Hourglass concealer, and I have the shade Dune. Now I'm not saying this looks as crusty as the Natasha Denona one, but this is probably the most full coverage. Like if you want full coverage, Hourglass concealer is gonna give you full coverage. It is a very similar texture to the Haus concealer, but I think this is more of a natural finish, and I prefer this concealer as a spot concealing product. Under the eyes, it looks crusty for me. A little does go a long way. Just like the Natasha Denona, you have to be very careful with this one under the eyes, but I think because of the creamy thick texture and because it leans a little bit more natural matte, it just does not fade well throughout the day or throughout the night. Under the eyes, it just always looks so cakey and crusty. As a spot concealer though, this is probably one of my favorites just because it is full coverage. The downside is the shade range is just meh. I feel like all of these concealers, there's no concealer that's like my perfect concealer yet. I haven't found that. And this is another example of shade range just being meh. I'm in between, I feel like, a couple of shades, and the shade Dune is the one that matches me the best, but some days I find it to be pretty warm or too light. It just kind of depends on what foundation I'm wearing that day. Overall, I would say that this is a above average concealer, and I would rate it a 4 out of 5. Last but not least is the Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk Face and Under Eye Concealer, and I'll just say it right off the bat. I do not like this for spot concealing. I do not recommend this if you're trying to use it to cover up acne or dark spots or texture. This is very much for the under eye. It is a hydrating serum-like texture, very liquidy. Dare I say the most hydrating and serum-like out of all of the ones that I've mentioned? Maybe, possibly. But due to that nature, it's very thin and also minimal pigment. So it is a very, I keep saying very, but it's light coverage. So if you have like heavy dark circles under your eyes that you want to cover, this is not going to be it. I feel like I always have to mix this with another concealer under my eyes to get the coverage I want, and I don't even have super dark circles, and I feel like that just defeats the whole purpose. If you're using this as an under eye brightener or maybe as like the first layer of under eye concealer, then it works. But in that scenario, for such an expensive product, I just don't think it's worth it. Yes, I can see the hype around this concealer. It's good for the under eyes, but I'm just gonna have to say that it's an average concealer and rate it a solid 2 out of 5. I would have to say that my current favorites, I feel like as much as I like have a love-hate relationship with some of these and none of them are perfect, I do use all of them weirdly enough. I like to mix a lot of concealers. I'm just like a concealer crazy person. But the ones that I love at the moment is the Haus concealer. Love this for under the eyes. It is my go-to for an under eye concealer. And then I really do enjoy the Kosas Revealer concealer for just everyday makeup. It never fails me. It's a good solid go-to concealer, and it gives me that natural finish. And as an honorable mention, the Tower 28 is pretty unique too. I prefer this as a foundation, so that's why I'm not saying it's like my favorite concealer, but this is a pretty unique concealer in terms of formula and texture in comparison to all of the ones that I have reviewed. So if you made it this far into this video, then thank you so much for watching. I create beauty videos from the perspective of someone who has acne-prone, textured, oily skin, and if that sounds like you, then I hope you stick around and don't forget to subscribe. As always, I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye!